I'm curious how you would answer the very same question Mr. Blanche posed, which is, should the DOJ be independent from the White House? Not necessarily act in counter of the White House, but not feel obligated to do a president's bidding.
No, I think the way Todd answered that question is exactly correct. I would have answered it the same way. And it is the law. And in fact, every president is entitled to have a Department of Justice that is part of the executive branch and answers to the president. The president appoints that person. The president's priorities are our priorities. And it is ludicrous to suggest that the DOJ should be independent somehow. And in addition to that, I would point out as recently as President Obama's Attorney General described himself as his wingman. And so it hasn't even historically been the case on the left that there was a pretense that the DOJ was independent of the executive branch somehow.
Well, the first example that everyone brings up is JFK, right? He put his brother in charge of the DOJ. But I'm curious to just explore this with a little bit more detail with you, because Todd Blanche called it an extraordinarily false narrative that the president says, go prosecute X and Y, and he does it. Give us a sense of what we're missing here in this conversation.
Well, I think he's talking about the accusation that the president himself specifically directs certain
Well, that's right, because a lot of people assume that. So tell us how different it is.
I think what we have is media narratives that have been very negative for this president, dating back to when he ran in 2016. I've been a supporter of his for a while, so I've been following it closely. And, every president has their priorities. And in the way, for example, at the Civil Rights Division, I announced on my first week, we're going to be following the president's executive orders and enforcing them. And, that itself caused a hue and cry, as if somehow we're not supposed to do that. But those are the policy prerogatives. I think the president's policy priorities and prerogatives are extremely clear. He puts out executive orders, he makes statements, and we have our law enforcement priorities of the Department of Justice going after crime. It is the Attorney General and all of the subordinate officers, our job to do our best to effectuate both our statutory duties as well as policy priorities. Both of those things go hand in hand.
Well, when you talk about policy priorities and going after crime, how does that pertain to the 2026 midterms, this cycle that we are in now, as we've obviously seen resources deployed to polling sites for monitoring as recently as last week's primaries? There is obviously an effort surrounding voter rolls. What more should we be expecting of the DOJ when it comes to election security and perceived vulnerabilities?
So we began our election security work almost as soon as I was sworn in last April. This is an ongoing duty and obligation. And by the way, it is no different than in Democrat administrations. In and out since the 1957, the United States Department of Justice Civil Rights Division has sent monitors to election hotspots, polling places, to increase voter confidence, to troubleshoot problems. And we are doing that now. We just did it in the primary. We're going to do it to the tune of approximately 1,000 election monitors in the November election. And this is just something that DOJ does,
Where
nothing different about it. Well, we are still formulating our final list, but the places where there may be language issues, the places where there may have been access of disability rights issues, places where there may be voter fraud issues that we've seen. We've had some prosecutions. I think you've seen some of those. There'll be some prosecutions in the pipeline of people who voted illegally, who should not have. And we see a problem, frankly, with some election officials refusing to clean up their voter rolls and knowingly allowing non-citizens, for example, to stay on the voter rolls. This is a federal crime. And so we've reminded people of that. But overall, the goal is not so much going after one voter here or there. It is increasing all American citizens' confidence in our elections, and that requires us to enforce our laws.
What's your biggest concern about election security beyond voter fraud? We've been hearing stories about cyber attacks on municipal water systems just in the last couple of weeks that some believe are coming from Iran, for instance. Are you monitoring foreign actors ahead of this election?
Well, I'm not going to comment on that kind of level of thing, but I will say that the concern about having elections that all Americans can feel confident in is a high priority of this White House. It's something that I frequently meet with other agency heads on, and Department of Homeland Security is involved in it. The Postal Service is involved in it. And we really want every American to get out there and vote and feel confident in the outcome. That's an important part of it.
Absolutely.
Is not just vote, but also feel like you can accept the outcome of the elections. And over the years, we've had Republicans and Democrats. Hillary Clinton and Stacey Abrams have both come out and said, they didn't accept the outcome or they didn't like what happened in their particular election. So this is a bipartisan issue, and it's a bipartisan problem, and we want people from both sides to be able to accept those results.
To return to your point on non-citizens being on voter rolls, it's one thing for them to be registered. It's another for them to actually go to the polls and vote. Can you give us a sense in terms of scale how many documented cases there have been of a non-citizen actually casting a vote?
Well, first of all, both of those are crimes. If they knowingly
but
register
sometimes
to
it
vote,
can be inadvertent, like in the New Jersey case.
It's not a crime if the state made a mistake.
Sure.
But it's a crime if you register to vote when you're not a citizen to vote in a federal election. New Jersey itself has admitted hundreds of cases, and I think the scope is actually much larger of non-citizen voting. And these are people who flagged themselves, according to New Jersey, hi, I'm not a citizen, and then they went ahead and voted. And so we don't know the scale of this problem because 2/3 of the states are refusing to cooperate with the Department of Justice's efforts to help them clean up their voter rolls under the Help America Vote Act, NVRA. We've requested this information under the 1960 Civil Rights Act. And so we would love for all the states to cooperate with us. But in the states that have cooperated with us, there are hundreds of thousands of dead people on the voter rolls, and there are tens of thousands of people who are not citizens on the voter rolls. And so to go through each of those, I'm not going to accuse anybody without doing the arduous process of checking that list against the voter rolls and see how many people voted. And then we refer those cases to the U.S. attorneys, our colleagues in the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI. So it's a long trek between getting those voter rolls and then prosecuting somebody.
We've only got about a minute left in the program. Can you get that work done before November?
This is an ongoing project, and there definitely have been courts that have not agreed with our efforts, and so we are appealing some cases. We just got a ruling in the Sixth Circuit that had some very good language in the en banc from several very respected judges, and so you may see us making a next stop at the Supreme Court on that.
Really?
So,
all right.
But it's not. Look, a lot of things are not going to happen, and it's not geared towards the midterms.
I understand.
This is an ongoing duty of the Department of Justice that will continue long after I'm no longer there.
Understood. Well, if this goes to the Supreme Court, we'd love to talk to you about it again. We appreciate your being with us in our bureau today.